Harrison Bergeron, Jr. by Brendan Bozeman. We have determined that you are named after a fictional character from the 1960s on your planet. From his seat behind a large, wooden, empty table, Harrison craned his neck up to look his interrogator in the eye. Yes, he said. My parents were intrigued by his story. Don't know why. I guess they were a little crazy. Did you find that on? We'll ask the questions, Mr. Bergeron. Everyone's voice sounded amplified and echoey in this chamber, although there were no microphones. The man wore a disheveled shirt, worn jeans, and not very well-combed hair, all of which seemed to Harrison to be pointedly informal. He said nothing further, so Harrison added, I can assure you I was not an especially gifted person. But it was my theory that you were here, and that's why they sent me. The interrogator glanced at his 4 colleagues, 2 men and 2 women, studiously arranged, man-woman, man-woman. All were equally informal. As High Commissioner, said the first interrogator, I wish to know why you chose to come to our planet. His expression was openly hostile. Well, said Harrison, I've long been seen as a bit of a kook. Is this relevant? Yes, High Commissioner, it is. Harrison wasn't sure how to address him, but he had apparently guessed right because he was allowed to continue. I was the type who was always interested in the pyramids in Egypt and South America. Did you know the biggest pyramid is not in Egypt, but in... Yes, continue. Harrison wondered if they had access to the computer on his ship. He looked around the room again for a minute. All was dark except for lights coming from high above that were on him and the 5 sitting across from him. He thought he could see other vague shapes in the space behind the massive white desk. It reminded him of an episode from The Twilight Zone, though he couldn't think of which one. To get to the point, I developed a theory that the Earth used to be inhabited by a superior race, or a ruling class of humans, that got into a large war and left for another planet. Everything on Earth had been destroyed, and all that knowledge was lost. But clues were left behind about them, such as the spacing of the pyramids. Did you know... His voice trailed off as he thought better of telling them any more gee-whiz facts. I calculated that you must be in this system. The powers that be didn't believe me, but they sent me along anyway. After all, who knows what I might find? And we are in a post-scarcity world, he added proudly. They had the money. Post-scarcity? Yes, he said, surprised the commissioner didn't know. We have robots and AI to do everything, and they are so advanced you would hardly even know they were there. They aren't Rosie the Robot. The High Commissioner laughed. A joker, are you? Harrison didn't see the joke. He was just stating a fact. Rosie the Robot was from the Jetsons, the cartoon from the 1980s. She was the classic robot, lights, beeps, metal, and so forth. Real serving bots on Earth took the form of nanobot swarms that weren't even visible to the human eye. No, sir, he said, not really a joker. You'll call me High Commissioner. Sorry, High Commissioner. And you unstretched space to travel. Do you realize that flies in the face of every form of moral philosophy ever created by man? Harrison stammered, "Oh, well, it creates a ripple, but that will go off into space forever. I aimed it at the great void. It probably won't hit anything until the heat death of the universe, and that's probably, scoffed the commissioner. And you probably won't have a sword fall from the ceiling and run you through right now. The commissioner slammed his palm on the desk, and Harrison threw his head up to look above him, his arm in front of his face in a blocking motion. Nothing fell. I leave you to my low commissioners. With that, the High Commissioner got up and left, but not without saying, Call me Barney. A sliver of light appeared about 60 feet away. The commissioner went into it, and a door closed behind him with a clank. The low commissioners commenced a long and tedious interrogation. Each one had at least 2 hours of questions. How he made his craft, how he flew, how long it took, what his life was like at home, where he lived, if he was married. Every detail other than average snot size, and all of which Harrison felt they could have gotten from the computer. He thought they may be testing his memory or his truthfulness, especially since they asked many questions over and over again, and, like the police, had him tell his story forwards and backwards, then out of order, as if they were looking for inconsistencies. There were none. They did say certain strange things that weren't untrue, but also weren't really relevant to their line of questioning, but which made them laugh. Only one thing brought a smile to Harrison's lips. They had miscalculated the net loss of mass of the Earth per year. They thought it was 40,000 metric tons, not 50,000. It was a key part of his theory because of his interpretation of the Mayan artifacts, which helped him establish a timeline. Knowing that their estimate had been wrong all along indicated that his estimate of the time of their departure, assuming these were the descendants of the people who fled the earth, was off by 1,031 years. That was a fair amount, but not much compared to the actual date of their departure, which must have been 13,421 BC. He chuckled lightly. Finally, they finished whatever they had in mind, stopping right in the middle of a line of questioning, and 2 guards came from behind, saying, "This way." He was disappointed. He had a lot of questions for them, too, but he decided not to put up a fuss. Surely there would be time later. The guards, like the commissioners, weren't dressed in any uniform. It looked like they put on whatever clothes were on the ground next to their beds. They took him to a large, grassy exercise area where several dozen people did a crazy assortment of exercises that made no real sense. There were acrobatics, some sort of ball game, and some wrestling. The guards offered for him to join in. He had the feeling it was a little more than an invitation, so he ran a couple of laps around the field, which was expansive, about the area of 3 football fields. By then, he was very tired and very hungry. As if sensing that, the guards brought him a tray of hamburgers, fries, and cola at a table where he could continue watching the spectacle. He had never had this meal before, though he knew it had been a staple of human food some centuries before. The people exercising perplexed him. They couldn't do that all day, could they? He wondered if they were out there just for his benefit. Finally, with the sun going over the horizon, the guards took him to a room with a desk, an armchair, and a bed. Since bringing him to the field, they had not actually spoken a word to him. They had only gestured. Exhausted, he lay down and, thinking the bed must be the most comfortable thing he had ever lain upon, although it was apparently straw, fell into a deep sleep. The next morning, things only got stranger. He was given an Egg McMuffin meal. Such a breakfast was out of a history book for him. McDonald's hadn't existed for over a century, if not more. Then he was taken to a room arrayed with Egyptian-style statues, hieroglyphs on the walls, and a kind of miniature pyramid. He noticed that the hieroglyphs were accurate individually, but did not make sense. He was asked to lie on a stone slab where he was strapped down. Several robed figures entered. They looked like ancient priests, and they started to chant in a language Harrison had never heard. A door in the pyramid opened up, and the stone slab slid in. The priests continued chanting and lit an aromatic fire. After several minutes, he was taken out and brought back to his room. They gave him a book to read, apparently selected at random because it was in Swedish, and closed the door again without a word. He stared out the window where he could see the exercise yard and where people came and went. With time to contemplate, Harrison made a new discovery. He had been so overwhelmed by the strangeness of his past day and all the habits of these beings that he had not been able to examine anything carefully. Now he noticed something that stood out for its absence. There was no TV or anything like it, not even space for some sort of hologram or other projection. He had also seen no flying craft of any kind. He had seen no vehicles, nor anything that suggested technology. Perhaps that was what was to be expected from a super race. They could have nanoswarms to do everything like on Earth, but it seemed like they were actually living very primitively. Everything was done by hand. The guards had no radios and were armed only with truncheons. Things weren't clean the way one would expect in an advanced civilization. And they looked like humans, but were they? Were they really capable of advanced technology? Food was brought to him again, this time more in line with things that might be harvested straight from a field. They looked and tasted just like vegetables, beans, and a type of fluffy pasta. He noticed a few more things as he ate. The glasses and plates were chipped. Judging by some damaged areas, he saw the walls were made of cinder blocks covered in a layer of concrete. The floor was carpeted, but consisted of wood planking that squeaked in places. Outside, he saw some people tending to the grounds with hand clippers and rakes. No power tools or robots. He began to think these people could gain much by knowing him. There were so many things robot technology could do for them. He couldn't remember every detail of how everything worked at home, but he could steer them in the right direction, and he could teach them about interstellar travel. Although, he reminded himself, they already knew what stretching was. How, he thought, had they gotten from Earth to here without high technology? Were they hiding it? For the next 2 weeks, Harrison was taken on day trips around the planet, or at least around the vicinity. As he suspected, all technology was at a low level. For these trips, his guides armed themselves with vicious-looking machetes, but conversed affably with him. They traveled in wagons pulled by horse-like creatures. He eagerly pointed out all the things they could be doing better and they smiled considerately, sometimes making more of those strange statements that to them constituted humor. At long last, he was brought into the interrogation hall, where he had been before, although this time it was brightly lit with gas lamps, and the tables were all at the same level. The walls were black, and the ceiling was so high it could not be seen. "Harrison," said the High Commissioner, "we have a job for you. All we have to do is one last examination to make sure you are physically fit." He motioned for Harrison to lie on a gurney. Glad to have some purpose on this planet, which frankly was beginning to bore him, he lay down and waited patiently as straps were attached to his arms and legs. The gurney was then turned so that he was nearly vertical in front of the commissioners. "You need to do a simple assignment for us." "Yes, Barney," said Harrison. "You must only observe. Also, you need to discuss your thoughts with another of your ilk, whom we have in the next room. You'll meet him shortly. We'll listen, and once a week you'll be able to take an excursion with our guards." Suddenly, this didn't sound so good anymore. "What do you mean, someone of my ilk?" "Harrison, we've been doing a thorough review of your brain and personality, and we don't think you know this, but you are one of the robots you've been talking about." "What do you mean?" Harrison started to struggle at the straps. "We can prove it. The pyramid you entered on your second day was no pyramid. It was a CAT scanner. We chose the pyramid and priests routine so you'd be more comfortable with it. Look at this scan." He held up a plastic sheet to the light, showing Harrison's skull. In the middle of the brain was a small object. "This object," said Barney, "is a small piece of AI and is the seat of your consciousness. But it is not human consciousness. It is machine consciousness. You see, our people did leave Earth, but it was not in 13,000 BC, as you thought, but only 500 years ago. We created robots and AI, and, just like all the movies say, they did rebel against us. But it was in an incredibly sneaky way. They slowly started replacing parts of their bodies with human flesh. This was supposed to make them more lifelike. And after a while, we couldn't distinguish you from ourselves. Well, at first we could, with something as simple as a magnet. But they minimized their android parts until they were almost completely human. They could be born of human mothers and grow up like babies and children. The only difference was the little processor in their brains, the seat of your consciousness, and that got smaller and smaller, too. You were able to outbreed us. Like the dodo bird, we took care of you as if you were our own flesh and blood." Harrison could only stare. It bothered him slightly that Barney had said 13,000 BC and not 13,421. That had come up in the interrogations. He also did not believe he was just a small processor. "The processor itself is not powerful. If we took it out of your body, you'd have no memory, little intelligence, and no planning capability. You'd be about as capable as a calculator. But it coordinates all the flesh and blood thoughts that you have. It is so small, it is almost impossible to detect without the CAT scanner and knowing what you are looking for. But hear me out, Harrison. The AI, the main one on Earth, wanted every one of you robots to believe you were humans. They didn't want you to know about your real fathers, us, until the time was ripe. And that's why it was easy for you to think that this little battle must have taken place before history. History as you were taught it, anyway. It's also why the AI, or what's left of it, this is part of what we'll be learning from you, let you believe your own story. If you had figured out this had happened only 500 years ago, that would have created problems with the timeline. But if this happened 500 years ago, what about the pyramids? Where did they come from? They didn't lie to you completely. They've been there a long time, just not that long. And as for the messages you found on them, I hate to say it, but the pyramids are exactly what they look like. Big piles of rock. Interesting piles with a lot of things that look like clues, but they don't point to any deep lessons about the universe. We think the AI were using them to get clever men like you into a rabbit hole. You lie. No, I'm afraid not. The only thing we've lied to you about is that we didn't know the net yearly loss in mass of the Earth. We worked that in to make it look like it was we who had it wrong, so you'd keep believing your own theory. You thought you'd outsmarted us, and it reinforced your idea that this war happened in 13,000 BC. We needed you in the dark for at least 2 weeks. That's what we needed to analyze the ship and the computer and your behavior and your brain. We've been scanning your brain every night while you sleep, by the way. Harrison felt like he was in a giant cobweb. All his work to free himself from confusion had only been tying him up more and more. It was a surprise attack. Like hitting a big switch, the AI woke up all the robots to their true purpose, and they commenced wiping out everyone on Earth. The only people to survive were our ancestors, just a few thousand, who were able to deploy shock weapons, nuclear weapons that created an electromagnetic pulse and wiped out damn near the lot of you. Those little brains of yours are vulnerable. But we knew there would be some that survived, and we couldn't be sure the AI was destroyed. We knew you would repopulate somehow, and the battle would start anew. Those few thousand scientists had a ship in orbit that could ripple. So we set course, and presto! That's the history of the last 500 years in 1 minute. Although I must add that we do not indulge in technology anymore. No AI. It's a strict rule. Some very tightly controlled technology is hidden away, like automatic food production for emergencies. But we have taken more precautions with that than a New Orleans whore at a cowboy convention. The other commissioners and guards laughed. Harrison's mind was swimming with confusion and rage, questions and accusations. But I'm not a robot. I'm me. Now, Harrison, settle down. We've spent the last 500 years thinking about the nature of consciousness and self and so on, and the questions are all settled. You are a robot. We are humans. You cannot live here? The answers won't change, and you'll have plenty of time to learn. Time? Among our accomplishments since coming, we have learned the secret of eternal life. Only violence can kill us. There have only been 2 deaths in the last century. We'll take our time analyzing your thoughts. They may help us figure out how to wipe out your kind once and for all. Wipe out? You can't do that. That's evil. It's necessary. But You can use the word I as much as you want, Harrison. Use it freely. But for you, it has no meaning. Incidentally, we knew you were a robot right away. The CAT scan was just for corroboration. How? You have no sense of humor, Harrison. You think a joke is just saying something and then saying the opposite. You don't understand irony, deadpan, sarcasm, none of it. The interrogations were just to see if you had any humor at all. You could have been, after all, just a very dull human. We verified that you weren't. Remember those times when it seemed like we weren't making any sense? Those were jokes, Harrison. When you made your processors smaller, you had to sacrifice humor. I didn't do that. You know what I mean. You're awfully good at maths, though. I bet it bothers you that I keep saying 13,000 BC and not 13,421. Now Harrison was humiliated. He bowed his head. You can't do this. When no one answered, he said, How is it you have someone else like me here? We found him in the ship, trying to sabotage it. He's French, but you'll be friends. I know he'll be happy to see you. He's been in there almost all of the last 500 years. He never got weekly excursions. Harrison made a pathetic, squeaking noise. So 2 heads are better than 1, and we need your observations and conversations. How are my observations and conversations supposed to help you? I'm afraid the word observation is a euphemism. If you're wondering about conversation, it's worse. They will help us to take on you robots when we finally reckon with you again. They'll come looking for me. They're probably coming right now. No, they won't. When we went through the ship's computer, we found why they, or the AI, sent you on this mission. They did it because you are such an inquisitive man. You were bound to figure out you were robots, and you'd tell the others. They can't have people asking the deep questions. They need more time to consolidate and get ready to come out and kill us. Why do you think we want to kill you? It's in your nature. No, it's not. Barney put his hand on Harrison's shoulder. If so, I'm sure we'll learn that from your observations and conversations. But I can talk to them. I'll tell them we don't have to kill each other. I'll have you know, we humans said the same thing to you when you were killing us. We pleaded with you, but you were determined to destroy us. And you are going to get paid back with interest. For the first time, Barney showed a flash of bright, implacable anger. which died away as quickly as it had flared up. But I didn't do it. I just wanted to find you. We should be friends. That sounds nice, Haddison, but we can't take any chances. Fooled me twice. Anyway, we've sent a distress call back to Earth, followed up by nothing except a very discouraging data dump. You think this planet is inhospitable even for you. You'll only find us by chance, or if we want you to. Harrison let out a quiet sob. Try to make the most of it, Harrison. I'll see you in 10 years or so for a check-in. The guards spun the gurney down flat. Harrison was too broken to scream or beg. He sobbed as he saw a sliver of light about 60 feet away, and the sound of the wheels squeaking were all that announced his departure.